Hey there. Hope everybody is good. See, everybody's logging on. Just like to introduce ourselves real quick. My name is Bobby Burke. I am the Ambassador Director for Bulleit Distilling Company. And joining me today is a close friend and colleague, Courtney King. She is a distillery manager of Bulleit Distilling Company. Hello, Courtney.
Hello,
Um,
hello.
so Camp Run Amok and Bulleit today, we teamed up with the Stave and Thief Society to bring whiskey credit certifications and the chance to earn the title of Executive Bourbon Steward to 50 of you out there. So all of you in the crowd right now, we hope that this is the first of a wonderful line of education sessions that we're going to have for you in this virtual certification program. We have 3 weeks of education from the teams at Bulleit and Stave and Thief, guiding you through an in-depth programming, um, course on distillation, maturation, American whiskey cocktail applications, which most of you already know about. And each week, around 2:00 p.m., our distillers, our brand ambassadors, and educators from Bulleit will dive deeply into the ins and outs of American whiskey and how we do it at Bulleit Distilling Company. And I'm happy to and honored, and Courtney and I both, to welcome you all to the first class. So they always save the best for last, if that tells you anything about me. So I'm going first. No, so today I'm joined by you, Courtney. Thanks for doing this with me. Just so you guys know, Courtney and I have known each other a long, long time. We've worked together for a number of years now. We're going to take a deep dive into whiskey production, take a look at the Bulleit process in Shelbyville, how we will dive a little bit deeper on how bourbon is made, just kind of the basic 101s, from ingredients to equipment, to the process from grain to glass. And we'd also like to take you a little bit behind the scenes in Shelbyville to highlight what we do, how we make our whiskey, what high rye means, and so forth. So before we get into it, like us on Facebook. I'll let you pause. Okay. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on YouTube. And follow us also on Instagram at Bulleit. So it's just at Bulleit. I know some of you received some samples. Today we're not going through a tasting, but if you'd like to sample any of just the base Bulleit bourbon that you have, a small little sample today is all you're really going to need as we're going through it, totally at your own discretion. Obviously responsibly, have some water nearby, and comment below if you have any questions, especially at the end. If you're one of our 50 certification students, we'd love to make sure that you guys get your questions in and we can get those at the end. So I think we should get started. Courtney, you ready?
Let's do it. Excited.
All right.
Alrighty. So we did kind of go through some introductions really lightly, Bobby did, but I don't want to let him be overshadowed. So just to introduce Bobby really quickly, Bobby is our National Ambassador Director for Bulleit. He has been with us for almost 15, if not over 15 years at this point, leading the charge out in the field, probably encountered many of you across the country and potentially globe at this point. There would be no Bulleit without Bobby here. So as he said, he's honored. It's really me that's honored to have him as my MC, but also I've learned quite a bit from him in the journey with Bulleit here today. So Bobby, thank you as well for being here.
Thank you.
It really would not be, it wouldn't be this without you here.
Well, that means a lot, and I feel all the love, and that's sweet of you. And likewise to Courtney, we're both East Coasters, so she is a Virginia native. I am a North Carolina native. Now we're obviously Kentucky. But Courtney comes from a pedigree of chemistry that a lot of people probably out there that have met people like Courtney all have their unique kind of capabilities. What I'm most happy about is I get to watch how that next generation of people that fall in love in this industry become really kind of mentors to people like me. I am nowhere near the scholar that Courtney was or is from college. I will tell you, people like Courtney, they will forget more about whiskey than I will probably learn over my career. But she was inspired to join Bulleit. She's super forward thinking. She's had a front row seat and a hand in a lot of our new innovations that you guys have probably seen out there. A lot of you have been asking about what's next for Bulleit. And you've seen things like our Bond and Bond, whoop, whoop, that I just can't stop talking about. A little bit about our single malt. So Courtney's been on top of it, and yeah, it's a privilege to be here with you today. So,
all right, well, let's have some fun, shall we?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, so let's kick it off and let's talk about what makes Bulleit, what makes bourbon. So by definition, bourbon has to be made in the United States, has to incorporate at least 51% corn in its mash bill, and be put into a new white oak barrel at no more than 125 proof or 62.5% alcohol. So that's what makes bourbon bourbon. But what makes Bulleit bourbon and more and makes it special? Well, that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today as we walk through this process and go a little bit deeper behind the scenes. Flavor starts here, starts with us, these two people and many more behind the scenes. So flavor at Bulleit begins with very intentional choices, and that starts with a mash bill. So some of you may be asking, well, what is a mash bill? A mash bill just is comprised of the ratio of the ingredients, the grains that go into the beginning of the process. You may have heard Bulleit is coined often a high rye mash bill. Well, what determines what is high? Historically, going back in time through the years and decades of bourbon production, bourbon was often made using very high inclusion rates of corn and wheat. Gave it a very sweet, smooth finish. But when Bulleit came and was originated about 40 so years ago, wanted to be bold, wanted to lead into a new consumer market, incorporating rye in a much higher inclusion rate. Again, historically, it was more in that 5 to 10% ratio. We wanted to push that frontier even further. So in my production process, we're really utilizing two different mash bills that we produce at one or the other time. One is a high rye mash bill, which is comprised of 60% corn, 36% rye, 4% malted barley. The other is a low rye mash bill, 75% corn, 21% rye, 4% malted barley. So even our low rye mash bill is still nearly double what history used to use from an inclusion rate. That gives us that high rye coin, that spicy character that's still smooth on the finish that you all see when you're tasting that every day. In addition to that, we have to be very critical and intentional with how we source that grain, how we review the quality of it. Every truck that comes in on site is going through intentional testing to ensure that the sensory of that grain, does it look like it's supposed to? Does it smell like it's supposed to? Does it have cracked kernels or foreign materials, twigs, rocks, things that we don't want to have? Is it clean? We review all of that before it even is entered into the system to ensure that it meets the utmost quality. High quality raw ingredients coming in means high quality distillate coming out. Other key raw material that we have to consider as part of this production process is the yeast. We don't get whiskey without yeast. It might be one of the most critical components in our process. So here at Bulleit, we actually have 5 different yeast strains or species, if you will, that we work with. And we'll only use one of those at a time in the production process. Each of those 5 yeasts has its own unique DNA that's going to produce a very unique flavor characteristic through the production process, especially in fermentation. So for example, we have a yeast that we call the strawberry yeast, and it quite literally produces a compound that smells just like strawberries in fermentation. Additionally, we have a jackfruit yeast, which if anybody doesn't know what jackfruit smells like, it smells like juicy fruit bubblegum. So we get to use those yeasts in our production process. And since they are proprietary, it helps make Bulleit even more special and allow us to have that quality control and manipulation as needed through our production process. All right, a little look behind the farm. So for those that may have not visited us in Shelbyville, here are just a couple of pictures behind the scenes of our beautiful distillery, some of the production equipment, and our warehouses. I just wanted to allow you all to feel a little bit at home as we continue to dig into the production. So let's talk about the distillery. So the Bulleit Distillery out in Shelbyville, Kentucky was built and commissioned in 2017. So we're approaching our 10-year birthday next year, which is very exciting for the team. And we're quite fortunate to have actually a number of people that still work at the distillery that have been there since it was literally just a field, Bobby being one of them. But being a relatively new distillery compared to many, in the state and across the country, has aided quite a bit to me and the team, because we were allowed to design the equipment and the building and really configure it to the quality that we were looking for in our liquid and the size that we needed. This new technology allows me and my team to have very precise control over the entire process and very intentional monitoring. For example, I'm able to look at our fermentation process, which usually takes about 3 days, but I can monitor and look at ethanol profiles or sugar profiles and make sure that everything is meeting both the efficiency but also the quality that we're looking for. So it really aids to us quite a bit and allows us to continue to improve and make innovations as needed as we go through it. But let's talk about the science. Let's really get into it. This is where the nerd in me, as Bobby alluded to, comes out a little bit. I studied chemical engineering.
This is where I'm going to get thirsty, right here.
Yeah, right here. You sit back, relax, pour yourself a nice glass. Let's talk about, how does that grain that I spoke about earlier turn into whiskey? There's 3 key steps into the production process: mashing, fermentation, and distillation. How do we get from corn and rye and malted barley into whiskey? So once we've brought that grain into our system, we need to break those grains down into a fine flour, which will allow us to extract those starches in the mashing process. So to do that, the grain is going to be fed through what is called a hammer mill, and essentially is just going to pulverize the grain kernels into a much finer material, like a flour, if you will, so that we can then feed it into our cooker. In the cooking step, we're going to feed grain into a batch cooker with water and backset. Backset is essentially the spent grains that come out of the bottom of the still that we're going to feed back into the cooker at a proposed ratio. And that essentially is actually allowing extra flavor and nutrients to be fed into the process. You all may have heard something called sour mashing before, and that's what that process entails. It really does add a nice component in the fermentation process and helps the yeast be more efficient, because it carries over some of those nutrients from previous fermentations. So we're going to feed our grain, our water, our backset into the cookers, and it's going to go through a heating and cooling process to help extract the starches that exist naturally in our grains. Starches are actually just long chain sugars. And so what we're looking to do here in the cooking process is break those long chains down into much smaller pieces, into molecules like glucose, sucrose, maltose. These sugars are then able to be fermented by yeast. So the main goal of our cooking process is really just break down long chains into small chains, starches into sugars. That process usually takes about 6 to 7 hours, from grain in to mash being transferred into a fermenter. And again, it's a batch process. We will do 2 cooks at about 10,000 gallons, and they will go into 1 fermenter at around 20,000 gallons, where then we will be pitching our yeast. Again, we're only going to produce 1 mash bill and utilize 1 yeast at a time. From the very beginning until it goes into a barrel. In the barrel, it's going to age as just 1 mash bill. The mingling part will happen much further down the road once it has matured. Mm-hmm. Our yeast, we're going to pitch at a specific volume, and then we do essentially nothing. Fermentation with yeast is a very natural process. That yeast is essentially going to consume its sugar, it's going to multiply, and it's going to be consuming oxygen at the same time. And as a product, it's producing 4 main things: CO2, heat, alcohol, and most importantly for me, in addition to alcohol, is the flavor. Alcohol and flavor are the two things that we're looking to produce in fermentation, and one is not more important than the other. If we produce a lot of alcohol but no flavor, you all are not going to be very happy customers. And if I produce only flavor and no alcohol, then the business is probably going to shut me down because I'm not yielding very well and I'm costing us a lot of money. So we have to balance those things very carefully and make sure that we are doing both of those goals, achieving both of those goals at the same time.
Courtney, I know I'm jumping off the slide a little bit, but is the yeast, I know questions are at the end, but I got to get this out.
Get it out.
Is the yeast introduced at a certain time and a certain, well, at a, when everything's at a certain temperature? Does temperature play any type of role before yeast is even introduced?
Big time. Yep. So yeast being a living, breathing organism, they have conditions that they need to be successful. Typically, we don't want to introduce yeast any hotter than 100 degrees.
Oh, wow.
So when that mash has finished its cooking process, we're cooling it down in a heat exchanger as it's going into the fermenter. Typically, we're going to let that fermenter fill to about 10-25%. And it's usually right around 90 degrees when we pitch it, but it's continuing to cool down. Most of the time you want to set, as we use the term set, finish your fermenter once it's filled, at around 80 degrees.
Yeah. Got it.
Now, again, because it is producing heat through fermentation, it's going to continue to warm up over that 3-day period. Because we are a newer technology facility, we have the ability to control that temperature, keep it at a max temp. That prevents the yeast from dying off. It prevents potential off character notes that we don't want it to produce from existing, because if it does get too hot, the yeast is going to get stressed. And just like us humans, if we get stressed, we produce sweat or something else. Yeast can do that too, and it can produce off flavor notes. So it's an intentional action to help control that quality curve and make sure that we're only producing the flavors that we're looking for.
Excellent.
It's a great question. Thank you, Bobby. So again, at the end of fermentation, we've got a beer, is now as we coin it. It's usually sitting somewhere in the 9 to 11% ABV range. It's a mixture of water, yeast, alcohol, grain husks, all of that. It is very sour. It is not the kind of beer you want to crack open and pour on a warm day. We need to refine that through distillation. So the entire goal of our distillation step is to extract that alcohol, extract those delicious fruity flavors that I'm hoping to produce every fermentation, and strip out everything else. So our distillation step is really a 2-phase process, but it is continuous. So we've been in a batch process from cooking and fermentation. When we get into distillation, we are 24/7 pumping that good liquid into our column still. On average, we're usually distilling around 3.5 fermenters per day. So some quick math, 70-ish thousand gallons being processed through this column every single day. It's a lot.
Funny. It's funny.
It's money right there. That's right. So we're feeding into our large column still. We have, doing some quick math, 15 trays and 3 rectifying trays. Essentially what we're doing is we're going to feed that beer near the top of our column still. It's going to gravity feed all the way to the bottom where steam is being directly injected to it. And that steam is going to create a temperature gradient from the bottom to the top of that column still. We're looking to separate alcohol from water through the power of boiling points. So alcohol has a lower boiling point than water, which allows us to take advantage of that physical separation and distill off the alcohol through the top in the form of a vapor. It's also going to carry over a little bit of water and also some flavor compounds, the flavor compounds that we are looking for. So that vapor is going to come off the top of the still. It'll be condensed back into a liquid. And at this stage, it's usually sitting at around 124, 125 proof, 62.5% alcohol. but it has some oily characters and mouthfeel that we don't want to put into our barrel. It needs a little bit more refining. So that liquid is going to be fed into one more phase of distillation, often called a doubler. A doubler is essentially just a continuous single phase pot still. Looks a lot like a pot still as well. We're going to, again, instead indirectly heat that liquid and distill it once more. The vapors coming off the top of that are going to be sitting a little bit higher at around 135-ish proof, so around 67.5% alcohol. It's going to have the character and the sensory that we are looking for. Fruity, smooth, a little hint of that raw material grain will sit in the background, but you will be able to identify a lot of the core components of the raw materials at this stage. Now, for those that are doing this whiskey accreditation course, you will have some new make spirit to look at some point, I believe next week with Andrew, where you all will be able to identify some of those core raw materials as you go through the process. You're welcome to look at them now if you'd like also. But again, it is sitting at 67% alcohol. We have to bring that down to at least 125 proof or lower in order for it to be coined bourbon and go into a barrel. So to do that, we're going to proof it down with RO water, reverse osmosis water, to bring it down to the right alcohol strength before it then is filled into a barrel. But that's a highlight of the process from beginning to end and as short of a time as I can do it. But at the end of the day, these steps are really how we're, making our new make spirit. And I often tell people, because it's a common question that gets asked, how long does that process take from start to finish? Typically, a truck of corn can arrive on a Sunday and be in a barrel by Saturday. So we usually say, it's about a day and a half to 2 days to go through the system and be mashed and cooked, 3 days to ferment, another day or two to be distilled and then put into a barrel and tucked away for a number of years.
As you guys out there in the audience can tell, my girl Courtney is wicked smart. So listen, that's a great point. How many barrels at the end of a week can be fully maxed out? Like, how many barrels does that mean?
That we produce in a week?
Like, is it 10,000? Is it 1,000? Is it 500?
It's roughly on average 1,000 barrels a week.
Jeez, amazing.
Yep. And when we're talking about our warehouses, which we'll touch on here in a little bit, our warehouses take 55,000 barrels. So you can, some rough math, say that we're just shy of filling a warehouse a year at max capacity, which is pretty crazy.
So let's get into the char. All right.
Let's get into it.
So what Courtney was, obviously eloquently explaining is what one of the things I want to talk about is when she talked about the starches and the sugars. There's another sugar along this process, and there's something called wood sugars. And a lot of times when some of the liquid will get into a barrel, as you guys all know, as Courtney said at the very beginning, whiskey has to go into a new charred oak container. That's the KDA rules. We use barrels. Barrel providers are from a lot of places in the country. There's multiple providers. There's Independent Stave. There's Speyside. There's a lot of different producers, and they all have kind of their own way of making barrels. Now, you can have a barrel that's got a light toast to it. You can have a barrel that's got a 1 char all the way to a 4 char, which is kind of like the sweet spot for us because a lot of that liquid will work its way into the wood, and they kind of call it alligator char. You can see it, this diagram here, number 4. The fibers of the wood really get into a powerful activation where that's where I think a lot of that, obviously, color is introduced, but you have a lot of flavors over time where the heat and the coolness through the seasons are going to have the wood expand and contract. A lot of you know this, but that's where a lot of this whiskey will end up penetrating into the wood, and the fibers of the wood, and the sugars in the wood will kind of interact over years. I think with Bulleit, we've got a bourbon, a base bourbon, and a base rye that average between 4 to 6 and 5 to 7 years old. And what you're going to end up seeing when a barrel is kind of emptied, you'll see a char line. In this picture in the top right here, you can see kind of an illustration of where the whiskey will penetrate itself all the way up into the wood to where the original native wood is still very blonde and still very dry looking. And you can see where it's been kind of penetrated in. It's nice and deep. You'll see some red coloration come in there. You'll see some deeper, violet color come out. And that's when I guess Courtney and the rest of the maturation team, Nathan, will go in and take samples and see if the whiskey's ready yet. If you see it at 4 and you see it at 5, if it needs to stay, let it stay. If it's ready, then we're ready to go to bottling. So these are just kind of some of the basics. I know a lot of you know this, but like what happens to whiskey after it leaves the barrel? That barrel is not finished. That barrel can go to Scotland. That barrel can go to Mexico. That barrel can go to Puerto Rico, Jamaica. It can end up with rum or tequila or scotch inside of it. So it's kind of beautiful. I think it's fascinating what happens to barrels along the way. Some of the char is left behind, and this photo here is actually the Bulleit fill house in the back of our facility in Shelbyville. But the char is not cosmetic, and one thing I want everybody to know is it kind of just governs the penetration of the whiskey into the barrel. And I think what's great about where we live in Kentucky, they make whiskey in a lot of other states now. When I got in the industry, there wasn't a lot of states that are making it. Now you can see whiskey being made in Maine, Vermont, New York. I see some friends that are in the chat over here from California and San Francisco. There's distilleries popping up everywhere, and it's a really good sign. And I still think that it shows that there's a lot of commitment to this category in this industry. But in Kentucky, we were left after the Ice Age with this kind of glacial, what they call a glacial aquifer. And one thing that the rest of the country does not have that I think we do have, and we're really proud of this, is we have a very natural limestone resource of really good water. And one of the things about what makes our whiskey so unique, in my opinion, is the cleanliness. The limestone removes the iron elements from the water, so that water really gets to become a massive ingredient to how we move into the distillation process. So yeah. So not a lot of questions. Courtney, I don't know if I missed anything about barrels and maturation, but we have 8 hoops, not 6 hoops, and we don't distill in wine barrels, if anybody was asking. So, but yeah. So
no, I think you touched on it, but it's worth emphasizing that our base spirits, our Bulleit, Bourbon, and Rye are not age statement.
Right.
Because we don't want to cap ourselves to that. We want to aid to the fact that one barrel could be ready in 4 years and one might need a little bit more time. Because, as I highlighted a little bit earlier, there's a lot of process control and monitoring in the distillation process, from raw material in to distill it out. But once we get into maturation, it's probably the most mysterious part of whiskey production. There's only but so much that we know is happening, and a lot still to be determined. It's the highlight, I think, of a lot of studies these days. We've been doing some stuff mapping across our different Bulleit distilleries and looking at the aging process. How does humidity have a factor, temperature, location in the warehouse, location of the warehouse. There's so many variables that, at the end of the day, we're excited happen. We don't want there to be so much consistency in this step that every drop of liquid that comes out of every barrel tastes the exact same, because it allows us to feature different things in different ways. For example, the single barrel program or bottled and bond, we're allowed to kind of feature some of these, nuances of the liquids through the maturation process. So it's a really mysterious step, but at the same time, very artistic and whimsical in its own way too, which I find quite fascinating.
I do too. I think there's a part of the science that you can see, and there's something cool about the science you can't see.
Absolutely. That's a great way to put it.
Going inside the barrel. Yeah.
Love it. Well, let's talk about quality control a little bit. So, once again, we'll get just a smidge nerdy. Bobby likes to make fun of me for it, but I often say that quality of whiskey has three corners of a triangle. So the first is knowing the flavors of whiskey that make it good. So Andrew will touch on this a lot more next week when we talk about blending and mingling. But Andrew knows that a good fruity distillate, so having high banana character, strawberry, all of those really sweet tropical fruits, that character going into a distillate makes delicious whiskey coming out of the barrel. Darker fruit notes, spice, vanilla, those beautiful notes that you see in a glass of Bulleit. So Andrew knows that that's what we need to produce. Then there's the next corner of what's the chemical compound that correlates to that flavor. So, for example, isoamyl acetate is the chemical that actually smells like banana. The third corner and final corner is how to make that chemical exist in the final distillate. So those three pieces are very essential to our quality control. We need to know what it is we need to make. We need to know what literally it is that we need to make. And then we need to know how to make it. And what I love about our Bulleit family is that we are very well tied together and collaborate on that exact thing. If one person doesn't know the how or the what, we are able to work together really well. And Andrew and I work very closely to ensure that what I'm doing is exactly what he's looking for as my number one customer. But in addition to that, when we talk about quality control on the Maturation side, once those barrels are tucked away, we put them in their warehouse. They're not going to be touched for at least 2 years, and literally not touched. They just need to have some time. They need to get out of their teenage years, mature a little bit, gain some color, gain some muscle. And at that 2-year mark, we will do what's called a survey. And a survey essentially is going to pull a representative sample of a lot of barrels, and a lot is basically comprised of a day's worth production. And we're going to take one sample for every lot that's at least 2 years old, and we're going to look at it. And by we, I mean myself, Andrew, and his team, and it's going to be assigned a quality code. And that quality code is going to follow it until it is surveyed or libraried again. And again, we're just going to look at that year over year and make sure that the whiskey is maturing the way we want it to, that it has the right code assigned to it so that we know what it can be used for and what blends. But that allows us to have visibility, throughout its entire process. And I think that's really special because I alluded to it earlier, one warehouse holds about 55,000 barrels, and we have 10 active warehouses on site. Not quite 100% capacity, just under that. We have roughly 500,000 barrels sitting on site. Now, I don't know about y'all, but I don't think that I can sample one of every barrel that we have on site and be able to look at them all. So this is a way for us to, be able to appraise those different lots manageably in the course of a year.
Now, when you do go to sample them, do you sample them from different? So let's just say the way that the sun sets on warehouse 5, that's a little bit further back, and it's colder in the morning for longer, or it's hotter in the afternoon for longer. Do you pull, instead of, obviously you can't pull 55,000 samples, but do you pull one from like 4 corners? Do you pull one from each level, like at the highest and the lowest? Do you do anything like that? Is there a program like that where you get samples pulled?
Yeah, so the short answer is the power of spreadsheets. Yeah. But we will strategically pull samples based on those factors. Yeah, okay. To make sure that we're accounting for those things. If we only pulled samples at the bottom of a warehouse, and I think we've got a picture coming later, but our pallets of our warehouses are stacked 6 barrels high. So there's quite a bit of room for some temperature and humidity changes there. And so like you said, if we only pulled samples from the very bottom row, we wouldn't have a representative sample of what might be, happening up at the top, because for sure the top of the warehouse is going to have a lot more significant temperature and humidity swings than
Yeah.
the bottom. So yeah, it's very important that we do that, no doubt.
They're going to get heat. Yep.
All that good stuff.
Yep.
Planning for the future. So I love this. I love talking about this because we're seeing it, live. We've seen it over the past decade. Forecasting what the consumer wants 10 years from now is no easy feat. When we look at the bourbon industry over the past 20 years and beyond, there's been some pretty significant swings. And so that makes, the job of myself and our planning team and our blending team, it's a very critical exercise, but also a very difficult one to try and forecast, because the liquid that I'm producing today, that I'm laying down and putting in a warehouse, I may not see for 5, 10, 15 years. And so we have to be thinking from an innovative standpoint, but also from a sustainable standpoint, how we strategize and lay our liquid down. We don't want to waste raw materials. We don't want to waste resources, waste the people and the buildings and things that we're using if it's not going to be well consumed in the future. But also what goes in it is also very critical. So it's a job I don't always envy with our planners and our blenders, but at the same time, it's extremely critical, and it's one that we don't take lightly. What we do with that then is for Andrew and his team to work through once we've had that liquid and it's had time to mature. So I know he's going to touch on it quite a bit next week. I don't want to steal his thunder too much, but it's definitely one not to be overlooked.
Yeah, tell me a little bit, real quick. Tell me a little bit about the so sustainability wise, we have a solar panel of about, I think there's 20 solar panels that help power a lot of the lighting, a lot of the forklifts, a lot of that.
Oh, yeah.
But what are other things? I mean, I know we have our retention pond. What are some other sustainability practices that we're kind of using to make the production go, and be more kind of efficient?
Oh, yeah. So the big one that comes to mind at our plant is when we were designing the distillery. You've probably heard me talk quite a lot about heating things up and cooling things down, and heating things up again and cooling them down. So that takes a lot of energy. It takes energy to produce steam out of our boilers. It takes energy or gas or electricity to power our cooling towers to make water cold to be used as a cooling substance. So through the design of the distillery, there was a lot of intentional moves made to identify opportunities to basically live heat exchange. So where can we run a line past something that is hot to help warm it up so that we don't have to use as much steam and therefore, non-renewable gas to produce steam if we can avoid it. Similarly, where can we pull heat out of hot water so that it doesn't require as much energy to cool that water back down to be recirculated through the system?
Yep.
That saves us money, but it definitely saves us a lot of utilities as well. We talk about the future. Our other distillery out in Lebanon, Kentucky, which supports the Bulleit initiative, has electric boilers, which they're incredible to see in person and how they operate. They're extremely quiet, and they're literally just using electricity and hot water to create steam. So we're constantly looking for ways to how can we reduce our carbon footprint and how can we save ourselves from having to use excessive utilities. Insulation is another big one, so that we don't have to waste heat, waste cold water, things of that nature. But yeah, it's always on mind for us.
Yeah, it's one of the most. I think I'm most proud of is the fact that you touched on it earlier when we were talking about distilling in the 21st century. Creating steam 50, 60 years ago. I mean, you're using fire or a boiler of some sort, and you're heating it naturally, with coal or with some other heating element. And this is something that we can kind of rotate. I just appreciate how much we've been able to commit to the carbon footprint at Bulleit.
Oh, yeah.
It's
Well, and the other one obviously that can't be overlooked is, the most expensive raw material that we use through the entire process is the barrel.
mhm,
You know,
yep,
we're and touched on it. We've got 500,000, barrels roughly on site, and each one of those has to be a new white oak barrel.
that's right.
So our white oak trees, we can't forget about, and we've of course partnered quite a bit with replanting new white oak trees to help kind of replenish that inventory across the country. So yeah, that's the other one that's pretty big.
Let's talk about the people. How good are the
It's my
people?
favorite.
But yeah,
It's
these
my
people
favorite.
today.
I could not talk about people more, especially these fine folks
I
on the
could.
screen
I
here.
could. See, I know a lot of these faces. No, no.
But seriously, I touched on it a little bit before. Bulleit's not one person doing all. I could certainly not run that whole distillery and put away as much liquid as we do by myself. And even if I had Bobby, I don't think the two of us could manage it, mostly because he's not smart enough, but he tries. He does have effort and passion, and I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
um
that's
we
100%
we we
right.
we featured some people here on the screen, but I mean really behind the scenes, from the production process, the innovation teams, the planning teams, the finance teams, it could not be more of a collaborative effort of the liquid that we produce every day. And that even goes way beyond the system internally, but spreads way out to Bobby and his team, to our distributors, to a lot of you on the call today, our bartenders, our craftsmanship, to decide to use this whiskey, to love it, to feed back on what we need or what could be better, because we need that, and it has to. That system is integral to have all of those channels together, and the passion really emulates. When you talk to these people. So yeah, I couldn't not talk about our people. That's for sure.
Yeah, there's I think it's one of those little metaphors we like to tell people out in the field. If you come to Kentucky as friends, we want you to leave as family. And a lot of these people in these photos become that. We're very, very blessed and very lucky to have people around us that are disciples of the brand, but also just love working together. They learn, bounce things off each other. Like I said, I mean, I know a lot of the people in these pictures will forget more about whiskey than some of us will ever learn. Courtney being at the top of that list, Andrew being at the top of that list. But there's just so much passion and collective expertise, in Shelbyville and across a lot of our distilleries. So we couldn't do it without them. But also, they do it. They do it for a couple reasons too. And the people that are listening and typing in some questions that we're going to jump into here in a second, Courtney, they want to see you guys go out and collaborate with consumers and how people are asking to consume. I never thought of one time that a martini with coffee in it was going to be something that Bulleit or bourbon or whiskey was going to be 10, 15 years ago, when the espresso trends happen. And that comes on the innovation of what happens in our liquid out into the hands of you guys out in the field. So that's kind of what, for me, it's just the people behind Bulleit just aren't at the distillery. They're you guys out in the field as well. And how we kind of collaborate with each other. Courtney, I've got some questions to jump into. You ready for some Q&A?
Oh, I'm ready. Let's do
Okay.
it.
All right. So here's one that I might be able to answer for us, because I think anything's possible. There's a question from someone that says, will you ever do an Amburana cask? The answer is maybe. I think the answer is maybe. It could be. I've tried a couple. I don't know, Courtney, if you have tried any Amburana finishes. They definitely have a unique characteristic to them. They're super powerful. They're super smoky. But I think the answer is maybe. Is maybe a good answer?
Maybe is a good answer, and I'll make it a little bit broader, just to say I think the innovative approach of finishing
Mm-hmm.
finishes of various times, whether it's mezcal or rum casks or sherry casks or wine casks, it's that has opened a whole new world of whiskey production that I, for one, am a huge fan of.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm always the ever classic overused answer is never say never.
Right.
I think maybe is a good way to put it.
Yeah. I think the innovation team and the folks that you get to work with every day, I'm jealous of that. You get to taste it at high proof before it's been, modified, and you get to do a lot with it. So great question. Here's one. What is the difference between White Dog and New Make? And I see you, Danny. I know who asked that question. What is the difference between White Dog and New Make?
Yeah, there's no difference actually, aside from depending, like every distiller might have a different way that they call one or the other. So for me, White Dog, if I use that term, White Lightning sometimes is often used, is usually the phrase for coming straight off the still at that higher strength. So 134, 135 proof-ish.
Yeah.
New Make usually refers to it's been cut. It's the strength of the distillate going into the barrel.
So
But oftentimes they're used interchangeably. So
it's like the introduction of water when you say cut.
yes.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
All
Proof down a bottle, or sorry, not bottling, filling proof. Yep.
Okay. Fill proof. Okay. I've seen that on a number of labels lately. It's kind of a new kind of trend out there, and some spirits are adding that fill proof. Difference between backset and distiller's beer, is that kind of the same?
Nope, but close. So very close. So distiller's beer is going to be that finished product at the end of fermentation, usually around that 9-11% ABV. Backset, though, is the liquid that has gone out the bottom of the still. So it's going to be stripped of alcohol and stripped of some of those kind of fruity flavors, because those have hopefully been distilled out the top. And backset will also run over a strainer of sorts to remove some of the thick solids. So it's more of like a thinner, slightly sour wort, got water, got grain parts, and some of those kind of like soury notes in it. So slightly similar, but a little bit different.
I've heard people describe it as kind of like distiller's oatmeal, but with like a little bit of the moisture's left over if it dried out. Like it's not super dry, but it's kind of like that substance, like that material. But that's a great explanation. Here's one. What char number does Bulleit use? And then the next question, two-part question is, does it use all of them? And I, for one, know this very intimately, but I don't know if that's for every innovation. Now, I think the number 4 char is what we typically go with, right?
Yep. Number 4 char on the barrel. Now we do use a number 2 char on the heads or the caps, just because they're not going to interact quite as much with the liquid. The liquid's really going to experience more of that surface area of the barrel itself. One thing that we have done, I'm not aware of us having played with char at all, but one thing that we have played around with is, though some people may have seen or heard of spiralized barrels or grooved barrels. So where the barrel manufacturer actually creates a groove on the interior of the barrel so that there's even more opportunity for that liquid to mingle with the barrel itself. Now, we don't do that for all of our barrels, just some of them. It's usually like a fixed ratio of the total number of barrels that we fill per year. But it does allow some other opportunity for maturation variability that we intentionally want to have.
Got it. So here's a great one. What about glass recycling? Do you crush your glass and repurpose it? Great question. I know specifically for American single malt, when we came out with American single malt, if you guys all look that up while you're at your computers, you'll see a glass bottle that's a little bit different for us. It is commercially repurposed glass, and as an effort to pay a little bit more tribute to being responsible at the distillery, we're also responsible in the field with that glass being commercially repurposed. So it's got that green kind of tint to it. So I don't think we do it with every single glass. We do ask that our vending partners, some of our distribution partners, and even people that have accounts, retail accounts, bars, we ask that the bar community, and we hope, and most of them do, they like to make sure if a bottle is going to be, emptied for any purpose of making cocktails. I've seen Bulleit bottles, which look really, really sexy in the restaurant space as water bottles. Have you seen that, Courtney, where they've actually used
I
them
have.
as water?
Yep.
I
I
love
think
that.
the other one is we partnered with the Don't Trash Glass Don't Trash. Gosh, that is a hard one.
That's right.
Don't Trash Glass program, and then also Recycle Well in Louisville to help drive some of those recycling initiatives. So there's definitely a lot of that going on too, which is great to see.
We got some Louisville people in the crowd right now. I see their names. Okay, this one's for you. I think maybe for me, because I consider myself a taster. As a taster, do you just drink water in between because coffee or soda could ruin your tasting palate, or is that false? Well, I don't think it's false. I think it's absolutely, definitely when you introduce other, acids, different types of flavors that will dominate your last taste of whatever it was. I like to make sure that coffee is something that you smell more than you taste. So it's great for a nasal cleanse. I don't know about drinking the coffee unless you're kind of working on cocktail variations and pairings. Soda, absolutely, I would not recommend introducing fructose or sucrose or any type of flavored syrup sodas like Coke or anything like that. But soda water, however, and the carbonation that's in soda water, Pellegrino, it does add a little bit of a sodium kind of introduction, but it does kind of break down a lot of the capillaries around your mouth and your front palate and back. But Courtney, do you have any kind of other?
No, I think those are good notes. I would say from my perspective, on days that we're doing a lot of sensory, on days that we're reviewing
in your palate
10 to 20 to 50 samples at one time, we actually don't taste a lot. So we do a lot of sensory via our nose. Most of your ability to taste actually comes from your nose. So we do more sensory just off of smell. And then on very particular days or things or final blends that we might be looking at, that's when we'll taste, just to be sure that the mouthfeel and things are what we're looking for. But I totally agree with you. I mean, our sensory rooms are all like filtered air such that, we can't get somebody's reheating salmon next door. It can't get into the room and, bring in some things that could definitely compromise our sensory ability. So yeah, I think those are all great notes. I'm a big water tea drinker myself. So I think
it's also kind of relevant to the activity in the air when I hear people talk about overexposure to yeast, because some things can live in the environment and can really get and interact with the yeast, sometimes positively, sometimes negatively. A lot of people that you'll hear kind of stories of some of the OGs in distilling, they'll be very humble about how they got a flavor profile and the science that Diageo and Bulleit puts into it. Some of the brands that are hundreds of years old, I mean, they didn't have spreadsheets and computers to analyze this. They had to really trial and error this thing. So great question. Here's another really good one. I know we touched on it a little bit. Is the time of the season put into consideration when you pull your samples? Great question, Javier. Really great question.
So the time of the season is not considered when pulling samples. The time of the season is definitely considered when we're talking about like utilizing liquid in specific things. For example, bottled and bond liquids have to come from a specific distilling season. So our first release that came out last year came from the spring of 2017. Usually liquids that are put away in the fall are going to have a more gradual maturation process, because that first 6 to 12 months of maturation is very active. And so if the first 3-ish, 4-ish months that the barrel sees is cold, the maturation is much slower. Not a bad thing, just slower, not as aggressive. Whereas liquids that are put away in the spring and summer often see some much more very active maturation because of those high temperature swings. So I would say from a sampling process, we're usually pulling at the same time every year so that as we are looking at a particular lot year over year, the liquid is in the same season, if that
Mhm.
makes sense.
Yeah.
And usually we do that in the summer time frame.
So I think what I'm hearing too, and hopefully this helps you, Javier, wherever you may be. It's less of a sampling situation. It's more of a filling when you fill. It's like the time of year that you finish your distilling and then you fill a barrel and you put the barrel away in that season. I see.
Yep. Yep.
You do it at the beginning of December. It's going to go all the way through, March before it warms up at all. Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
Another one. Do you have a distillery cat or dog? And what's their name? And if yes, do you have a photo? I personally am unaware of one. I see wild animals all the time.
We definitely have a distillery animal.
Okay. All right.
Gosh.
Okay.
We do have a distillery cat. We adopted her. She was a stray that ran through the property, I want to say 5 or so years ago. She is a black cat. Her name is, yes, Bulleit. She started out, I don't have a picture of her. She started out just kind of roaming, and our security guards have fully adopted her into the security shack, and she is extremely spoiled.
I've only seen her up front by the guard gate. So
yep, that's where she lives. But aside from that, yes, we do have lots of deer and wild turkey and various wild animals, which I personally love to see in the morning. And we do utilize the grain dust that we filter through our system. We do dump the corn dust for the deer, and they do love it.
Awesome. Outside the property, I think we have 362 acres. So as you guys could probably imagine, if you've driven through Kentucky before, the rolling hills of Kentucky, there's animals everywhere, and it's wonderful. Nicole Taylor is on top of her game. She is asking some great questions. Here's another one. Does bottle process through production with the shape of the bottle, does it cause any issues through the filling line? I've seen it move. I think it's probably the most state-of-the-art thing I've ever seen, because I remember when it got installed. I would say it's probably, Courtney, I don't know what your take is. I would say it's a little bit more of the company that had to make and design the bottling line, because they're so unique to the bottle that actually goes down the line. But Bulleit, being the contour that it is, having that rounded edge, I would say likely introduced some challenge maybe when it was being designed.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is just my perspective. I think that's just a commissioning aspect of any bottling line. You're gonna center line your fillers and things and the various components of the filling line for the bottle design. What I would say we might see more challenges with is, because our bottle is unique, it's not a common bottle, that might be utilized in many different brands or purposes, because our bottle is specifically, designed for us. We sometimes see more production challenges of the glass coming in because it's not like universally produced.
Sure.
So that's probably the bigger issue that I see, and fortunately we've got some pretty great suppliers that help us with that, because the bottle is one of the biggest, unique parts about that helps it stand out, and so we obviously want to keep that.
Right.
But yeah, great question.
Yeah, great question. I'm kind of drinking from a fire hose here. There's a lot coming at me here, so I'm going to try to get to everybody, because I know we're almost at time here. So if I didn't get to your questions, make sure you leave them, and we can get to them later. Definitely in the chat. Oh gosh, what was the first movie or TV show that featured bottles of Bulleit? I don't know. I've been on the brand since we just had the orange label, and I remember the first time seeing it on television, I almost fainted, because I personally have always treated Bulleit, and still treat Bulleit, as like this underdog brand, and we're still out there trying to win everybody's hearts. I saw it on, obviously, Yellowstone. I saw it on a Sylvester Stallone movie. I've seen it in a bunch of TV shows. Does it stood out anywhere for you, Courtney? Have you seen it on TV?
I mean, Yellowstone was the big one
Yeah, sure.
recently.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't keep them in memory, but that going back to the bottle thing, I mean, that's one of my favorite things about it is if and when it is utilized
Right.
in media, you pick it up, right
Right.
away. So that's fun.
Here's one. Has Bulleit ever done a mash bill with a lot of wheat, or would that undo the rye? We don't typically touch wheats. Doesn't mean that we never will. Just I don't know what undo the rye means, but it probably would affect having 4 ingredients, because I think there is 4-grain whiskeys out there. We've never done a 4-grain yet, but we could. Doesn't mean we won't. Innovations.
Yeah, I don't think it would necessarily undo it. It would depend on the ratio. If you included it at an even percentage, like if it was
Sure.
even wheat and rye, you might see a little bit of both come through, depending on what flavor profile you were looking for. Um, but yeah, like I said earlier on that other question, never say never.
Yeah.
I personally would love to play around with wheat, so
So there's a
we'll
couple
see.
questions about yeast strains in here. I think we're going to go way over on the yeast strain answers because it's a complex question. So no disrespect to who asked that question about yeast. It's a very good deep dive. Is sensory fatigue something that happens often, and if so, what do you do? Okay. Yes, it's a thing. I think the most common thing that I've seen is just take a break. Just take a good hour break if you're going into doing. I mean, the most I think I've done in a day is like 100, which is a lot. But
Yeah.
I mean,
It's a lot, and it does happen. I think, like I said earlier, utilizing your nose versus your tongue can help.
mhm,
The other trick of the trade, if you're doing like a couple in a row, is in between sniffing the back of your hand. To say the back of your hand, like your own smell, is the easiest way to reset your sensory palate. So that's a trick that we use, in between.
mhm.
But usually, and feel free to ask Andrew as well, because he looks at more samples every day than I do. But I think they try to keep the number that they look at per day pretty capped.
Yeah.
So that helps too. But it's a
Here's
great question because there's a lot to look at.
Yeah, and I'm gonna try to blast through these three because I feel terrible about people not getting their questions answered. What is the biggest flavor difference between barrels from the top and the bottom of the rack
Mhm.
house? We don't have a rack house; we have a warehouse. All of our barrels are palletized. Um, are there any major differences, even small amounts of ABV? Probably 5%, I would say from top. We're
At
very
least.
good consistently. I think that's mixed. So sorry if I got your name wrong, but the back corner and the highest point in the back left of a warehouse and the lowest corner in the front of a warehouse should not be that much different. Will they change a little bit? Sure. Flavor differences, Courtney. I don't know if they'd be. I mean, there'd definitely be
So
more wood sugars coming in, the barrel moving,
yeah.
and the closer to the sun would be the higher rack, but or,
Yeah, I would say the flavor difference shouldn't be huge. The raw materials are going to drive the flavor difference more. So what yeast did we use? What mash bill did we use?
yeah.
Now what you can see from the position is the progress, if you will, of maturation. So if you looked at a barrel at the top and the barrel at the bottom at, like, let's say the 6-month mark, the top could look darker than the bottom,
Would,
depending on when it went in and the
would,
seasons that
would
it's
there be
experienced.
any angels share? Would there be any like leak, push
Big time.
on the top one versus the bottom one? Okay.
It could, yeah, because again, that angel share, you're going to see probably more evaporation at the top just
Yeah.
because of the temperature swings as opposed to the bottom. But that also alludes to the color difference too.
All right. It's another Mick question. How much input does the team have on new expressions? You don't have to answer this, Courtney. You can skip it.
um,
Big input.
fortunately, yeah. Honestly, we are quite fortunate to actually get to provide quite a bit of input. Um, Not saying that they're all utilized, but we do, because Andrew and I have such a great relationship. There is a lot of chatter between he and I. things that we want to try, or hey, is this coming down the pipeline? Is this something that we could put into the pipeline? When I say pipeline, that's what we call our innovation plans.
Yeah.
So usually we're trying to do 2 to 3 innovations per year, to lay down, a small volume of liquid that could turn into something else, in the near future.
All right, this one I don't think you're allowed to answer, so if I have to mute you, I might. But what's something cool and weird that you are playing around with and doing some R&D on? We might have to get some. We might have to have somebody sign an NDA before you answer. Yeah, is there anything like that you can talk? I mean, all I know of is just what new innovations come, and I get them after they've already been committed to. So this one's on you.
So it's probably not as teasy fun as you might like, but I'll do it anyway. So historically in the production process, we've always kind of applied the same conditions to our fermentations, regardless of the yeast and the mash bill that we're doing. And so the big improvement project that I'm working on with my team right now is optimizing that for each yeast. So, for example, like I, for one, like a warmer climate. I can't stand the fact that it's 20 degrees outside right now.
Right.
Some of our yeasts also like a warmer climate, where some actually like it much cooler. So what we're playing around with is, the sugar profiles, but also the temperatures that we're working the yeast into, so that they may produce a different or stronger flavor than before, hoping to enhance, its character a little bit more. So it's not, I mean, it's R&D, but it's not like
Sure.
a liquid per
That
se.
still is, yeah.
But it's been fun to mess around with and kind of do some trials and see what works and what doesn't and stuff like that.
Yeah. What food pairing would you say is the best with Bulleit? This is easy because we're in the middle of a partnership and a study, if you will, across the country with a number of restaurants, chefs we partner with at live events. We did South Beach Food and Wine, Pebble Beach Food and Wine. We do Big Smoke out in Vegas that has like cigars and barbecue. The Kansas City Royal in Kansas City, the American Royal. We have a partnership with Traeger Grills out there. We're doing some smokes. I mean, I'm just going to throw barbecue out there because it's such because there are ways of integrating and introducing our whiskey into the ingredients of what recipes you're working with. I just tried a Korean barbecue Bulleit sauce the other day that they used in Korean barbecue. You can totally taste the whiskey. So yeah, I'd just say barbecue's easy. I've seen people use it in desserts.
I was gonna say chocolate.
Yeah, chocolate and so forth. Chocolate's another question on here. I just saw. I might have lost it. Have you explored using things like malts and things like chocolate with the rye for unique limited runs?
So chocolate malts, coffee malts. It's incredible the different roasting and like expressions that maltsters are doing now, and I love it. All I can say is stay tuned.
Yeah,
because we may have played with some of that.
Yeah, here's one. What about barrel collaborations? Do you guys do barrel collaborations with consumers at all? Only for, I don't know what collaboration means, but do we collaborate and let consumers, pick their own liquid on single barrel? Yes, but at the store level, we have a number.
And don't forget about our beer collabs.
And our beer collabs, that's right. So, if you're in Kentucky, we work with a wonderful brewery group of people in Lexington called West 6th. And they have made, I think they're on their 5th barrel collaboration where we send them barrels after whiskey's been dumped, whether it's rye, whether it's bourbon, whether it's 10-year. I know we didn't get to dig into 10-year today in the rest of the line extension, but basically they'll take a pretty freshly dumped barrel and they will put a stout in there and really let the whiskey interact with the beer. And they'll do that for about 6 to 8 weeks. And I mean, I've tasted some amazing different beers. I've got a couple on my desk here that are just incredible. So the other ones would be more of a single barrel opportunity, but that's more of a liquid selection. All right, it's 3:09. I got 5 minutes at the max, so I'm going to try to hustle through one more question. Is that okay? I don't know which one to pick. While a lot of bottles and brands are redesigning their bottles for whatever reason, is there a chance that you will change yours? I certainly hope not. Our bottle is. I don't know if anybody. I'm just biased. I don't know if there's a bottle that pops when you see it on a back bar like Bulleit. I'll never forget the first time I saw it on a back bar. And bartenders would always be able to say, I know where it is on a back bar. It doesn't get lost. I don't mean to say that other bottles aren't cool. There's some cool ones out there. You obviously know where a bottle of Makers is when you see a bottle of Makers, right? Because of the wax. But with ours, we've got the green for the rye. You've got if you've seen some of our innovations now, we've got some variation going on. But I don't think the actual anything other than a label is really going to change that much. I think the glass won too many awards to change now. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. So
I agree with that.
Have we ever thought about collaborations with other distilleries? Yes, I've thought about it a million times. Close friends with a lot of other distiller ambassadors and blenders. Play golf with a couple of them. I will tell you, we've had the conversation. I think it would be wonderful, especially today's modern day, where we could do a barrel that's filled with 50% of our stuff or 50% of theirs. Or I've really thought about this a lot lately. Have you, Courtney? Have you been thinking about?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I think something that's so unique to this industry, and I'm sure a lot of you have seen it, in your field as well, is it's collaborative in the sense that there's a lot of people that kind of travel throughout the bourbon world. We know a lot of people, and it's always still very family oriented. Like, even though we've got competitors, we're still, it's like this big Kentucky love of bourbon and sharing that craft with the world. And so, yeah, I've definitely thought about it. I don't think, again, that it's a no, never. It's just a matter of maybe when and how we do it.
A lot of people above our pay grade.
Yeah. Maybe a little.
Well, listen, I have a few parting notes to kind of give people, but Courtney, I just want to tell you thank you. You are a absolute encyclopedia of intelligence, and I appreciate it. And I hope everybody in here today enjoyed their education and their session with Courtney. Thank you for having me. If you enjoyed this class, make sure that you like it, love it on Facebook, facebook.com/can'trunamok, or youtube.com PDXCW. We're also you can also find them at Lush Life or at Camp Run Amok on Instagram. And you can find more about Bulleit at Bulleit. Let me talk about some of our friends that are next week. I'll keep all my silly jokes to me and just Courtney once we're off, but I will say these guys are close friends of not just me and Courtney, but a lot of you out there in the field have either seen them. You obviously tasted some of their liquid, but you've been to some of their classes. You've seen some of their presentations and educations. They're going to be going through the art of blending and maturation for Bulleit. And that is our master blender, Andrew Mackay, and our brand home director, Mr. Doug Craigle. So please tune in. 2 p.m. next Monday. Enjoy it. I'm tuning in. I'm not going to be talking as much, which I'm sure everybody's very, very happy about. But Courtney, thank you. Great job today. I agree with that last comment. I love to see more females in the whiskey world. Most of the people that have influenced my career in this space have been females, and Courtney, you're one of them. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Love you guys a lot, and thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. See ya.
Thank y'all. Have a good one.
Bye-bye.